Light it up. Welcome to another episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Maybe it's me who needs to understand Fred. You know, walk a mile in his ascot.
So let me get this straight. To stop annoying Fred, you're going to become Fred, which is guaranteed to annoy Fred?
Sandwich, big sandwich.
Build that sandwich high.
Sandwich, big sandwich.
Up into the sky.
He used to say, "Whoa, nobody move. My tuna fish sandwich is missing."
Well, that's a weird thing to say.
Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you all had a safe, relaxing time over the holidays. For the first month of 2021, we've got another theme month on the podcast. This time, we'll be focusing on Be Cool Scooby-Doo. To kick off the month, we have head writer and story editor on the show, Jon Colton Barry. It's been a while since I had the chance to chat with Jon, as I did want to post it within the themed month, so I'm excited for you to finally be able to listen to it. And without further introduction, let's just get right into the interview. Hi, Jon. Thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Hey Alexa, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. If you're up for it, I'd like to start off with a quick 3-question trivia game.
Okay. For you or for me? Do you want me to ask you questions?
Oh, well, I guess we could switch it up, but I'll ask you questions.
Okay, all right. It's good. I'm not prepared.
So, question 1, can you name both Fred and Velma's fears that come up in Be Cool Scooby-Doo?
I can, yes. Fred is afraid of wits, and Velma is afraid of water.
That is correct. In question 2, in the episode All Paws on Deck, what happens to Fred's cousin Scott throughout the mystery?
Um, Poor cousin Scott becomes prematurely grizzled due to the stressful, difficult life at sea.
That is correct as well. And last question for the trivia. In the episode Their Wolf, can you name one of Dr. Dunsbury's siblings' unrealistic careers?
Oh, yes. I think his sister was a princess mermaid or something. One of his brothers was a space pirate cowboy. Am I close? Or wasn't that it?
Yeah, it was a fairy princess mermaid and a space pirate and a cowboy fireman.
Oh, a cowboy fireman, right? Um, I knew those occupations were all mixed up in there, but yeah, I forgot which combo we did. I totally forgot about that. That's great.
And to start off the general questions, what's your relationship to Scooby-Doo? Did you grow up watching?
I did, yeah. Growing up, mostly reruns of Scooby Doo, Where Are You? Played a lot, and that was mostly what I grew up with. But the new Scooby Doo movies with the guest stars, I remember Laugh Olympics, all that stuff. Yeah, Scooby Doo was ever present, and I think in most childhoods. I mean, there's never been a time when there wasn't some iteration of it on the air, but certainly in mine.
Do you have a favorite personal memory related to Scooby-Doo at all?
Um, not a particularly distant one. Most of my fondest memories of Scooby Doo are from working on Be Cool Scooby Doo, and a lot of those were just particularly early on, when it was just Zach Moncrief and myself sort of coming up with how are we going to approach Scooby Doo? What are we going to do? We had just such a great fun time reimagining these characters in this show, and coming up with what became Be Cool Scooby Doo. It was really exciting, and we laughed a lot.
And can you elaborate a little bit more on maybe what that development process was like?
Yeah, Zach and I had worked together on Phineas and Ferb at Disney, and we really enjoyed the work that we did on that show together. He was a director. I mean, he did some writing and storyboarding as well. He's a great writer also, and and there were a lot of episodes that we did together. One of them was nominated for an Emmy that we did together. And there were just lots of little moments where we were together in a room working on just a little character moment where we felt really connected, and we were on the same page with how important just to get those little moments right was. And he then later on moved over to Warner Brothers and was offered Scooby-Doo to run Scooby-Doo. They had Mystery Incorporated had been the last iteration of Scooby Doo, which had been a much more serious, sort of gritty, actually kind of frightening version of Scooby Doo. And Warner Brothers wanted the next version to be the opposite. Sort of, they said Mystery Incorporated was 70% scary, 30% funny, and they wanted to flip it for the next version. And Zach very kindly said, "Well, I think then we need to get John in here because Warner Brothers had also said, yeah, we sort of want to make the Phineas and Ferb version of Scooby Doo." So he called me up and asked me, would you be interested in that? And I certainly was interested in working with Zach again on something. I didn't consider myself to be a giant Scooby-Doo fanatic, or even, I didn't know very much about Scooby-Doo apart from Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And having, superficially seen other iterations of it. So I went in pretty open-minded, and Zach and I we watched Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And apart from the nostalgic, like, oh, I remember this as a child, just from a technical standpoint, we were like, this is not the greatest show in the world. It's the most of the main gang are sort of cardboard and one dimensional and sort of vanilla. They don't really have personalities. They don't have points of views as characters. There's sort of these generic. Fred is the leader. Daphne is the pretty one. She had the danger prone layer of her, but there wasn't really a point of view that the character had as a personality. Velma slightly more as being sort of the brainy one, but even that wasn't absolutely spelled out in Scooby Doo. Where Are You? It was mostly Shaggy and Scooby were given sort of definitive points of views as characters. They were afraid of everything and always hungry. You sort of knew what their goals were, apart from solving mysteries, which really wasn't their goal. But so the big revelation to us, looking at then all the other iterations of Scooby Doo, where they suddenly put in Scooby Dum and Scooby Dee and Scrappy. They took out Fred and Velma and just left Daphne, or took out Fred, Velma, and Daphne and only had Shaggy and Scooby. Um, it all seemed to be trying to fix the main problem we saw, with the original version, which was Fred and Velma and Daphne could be uninteresting characters from time to time. They just didn't have a lot to offer from a point of view character wise. So why don't we address that and actually give Fred, Daphne, and Velma very distinct comedic points of views and elevate the entire gang into a comedic ensemble? And we were surprised that no one ever actually did that. Mr. Incorporated might have moved a little bit more in that direction, but they were still to me fairly simple. Sort of Fred is into traps, Daphne is into Fred. Those weren't exactly points of views or personalities to me. So we spent quite a long time working and developing the main gang personalities and sort of doing the algebra of that. So when one of them is behaving, in an extreme way, the other ones will be reacting extreme ways. That if one is being funny, the others can be funny. That they all would be bouncing off each other correctly. And that was the main intent and goal, developing the show, was getting the characters into this sort of funny new place. And when I arrived, when Zach first arrived, Richard Lee was the art director on the show, and he was the only one working on the show at that time, just doing art. And the designs of the show were very pushed and much more cartoony when we arrived than they had ever been, and that's the direction Warner Brothers wanted to go. And so Zach and I kind of leaned into that, and the look of the show is actually essential to the writing. So many people say, "Oh, I hate the way people Scooby-Doo looks, but we love the writing. It's very funny." When the writing really only works because of the way it looks. The wide range of humor and tones that we try to get in the show is dependent on the more cartoony look. So all that stuff together was the development of Be Cool Scooby Doo.
And going off of that, was there like a specific inspiration or a purpose for designing the characters that way that kind of flowed into the writing?
Yeah, I think it was just a desire to try something new and different, which I think is always a good idea and always valuable, to take a chance and try something. Um, the and also we were going for a more comedic take on the franchise, and it's sort of like The Simpsons. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, "Wow, what a fantastic looking show! What wonderfully aesthetically beautiful characters these are." They're sort of weird looking yellow spiky haired people, and but the writing was so great, and the characters are so rich and dimensional, that you could do the most broad slapstick humor in the world, and also do truly poignant, heartbreaking moments that would make you cry on that show. And that had to do with sort of the look of it. If we had kept that more realistic, traditional Scooby Doo look, a lot of the humor and the slapsticky, broader, surreal stuff just wouldn't have played well. It would have just played strange and odd. It was pretty essential, and I think that's what they wanted, and so the look was very, very much a desire to be able to play with comedy without restriction.
And just off the top of your head, can you think of a specific example where you could really lean into the more slapstick side with the art?
Um, yeah, in the very first episode, Shaggy and Scooby have that scene in the vending machine with the ghost of Elias Kingston. Do you remember that in Mystery 101?
Definitely.
That that is surreal and absurd and very slapsticky, and would have just felt very odd if they were very more realistic looking characters. But we could get away with doing something like that because of the pushed, more cartoony look.
And going off of the ability to develop the characters more, was there a favorite character out of the main gang to give more personality to for you?
Yeah, well, at first, Daphne was the exciting one. The idea of making Daphne, Shaggy and Scooby had been the comic relief traditionally in the show, um, and the idea of taking Daphne and basically imbuing her with traits where if you were to describe her character, um, there is virtually I don't think there's any main adjective you would use to describe Daphne on Be Cool Scooby Doo that would have anything to do with her gender, that she's a woman. That really has nothing to do with her personality, and just taking her away from being just the pretty one, um, was a lot of fun, and making her just sort of bold and creative and silly, and um, the almost the main comic relief was a lot of fun to do, and she was so much fun to write. And Gray, who did the voice, it's not unlike in person, the Daphne from Be Cool Scooby Doo. So she just immediately got the character and was brilliant voicing it. Uh, Daphne just really came to life early in the process, and was for me the most fun to work on and write. But eventually, Fred caught up to her for me, and I began having a lot of fun with Fred.
And more on Daphne specifically, what was it like to try and come up with a new like thing for her for each episode, from like the puppets to the beard to the mime?
it was it was it was challenging occasionally, but those are really fun challenges, um trying to come up with something for Daphne, was essential for it. And as time went on, for me, I found that, for instance, if you remember the season 2 episode, in Salem, the World of Witchcraft episode, just giving Daphne a strong point of view on the the main subject matter of the episode or the location began working just as well for me as giving her, what we call the Daphne du jour. So we began moving into that in second season. So it really began to become just limitless and easier as it went on, because she was felt very, very real and established as a character as we went along.
And what was it like to try and play her up as more than just like the, stereotypical like pretty girl, and giving her more dimension?
Well, it was rewarding, and it was satisfying and great, and it was fun, and I think important, because it's Fred suffered from basically the same thing. He was just the, I guess, handsome jockey leader type guy, but he really had no personality. Um, but it seemed, at least he was the leader. He had a position of power, and it just sort of seems, telling a girl, that her value is she's the pretty one, is is not, you know a very smart or helpful thing to do. And so, we weren't really thinking in terms of role models. We were just thinking in terms of what would be a fun character, and that is giving a positive aspirational sort of um, flavor into the world as well. So I think Daphne does that.
And I wanted to chat about Velma a little bit too, because Be Cool was the first television series that Kate Micucci came in for Velma.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what did Kate bring to the role to make Be Cool's iteration of Velma the way that she is?
Kate, is also just brilliant, and such a great person to work with. She is so creative and so fun and smart. She she brought this sort of awkward vulnerability to the character. We had my great regret with Be Cool Scooby Doo is that we had a lot more for Velma that we never had time to service. All these layers to her personality we want to sort of develop and explore, that we just didn't get a chance to really do and establish enough early on, so we were able to continue evolving it. So it always kind of bugged me that Velma was a bit shortchanged, but I thought Kate brought a real sincerity and socially sort of awkward vulnerability to Velma that made her feel very relatable to me personally, and she worked really well within the context of the rest of the gang. It was just a really strong ensemble of actors doing a really great job bouncing off each other and connecting.
And what was it like to work with, Frank and Matt and Gray, who'd been voicing the characters for so long, to kind of give them a new way to play with those characters?
It was a lot of fun. They're such pros, and they really take their work seriously as much. I mean, they have so much fun in the booth together, um, and it's just joy to record with them. But they're very serious professionals about what they do, and they also came in with a lot of ownership of these characters. They had been doing them for a very long time, and their opinions about what the characters would or would not do, how the characters would or would not do stuff, was essential, and it was important to us. Um, and so when we began working with them, it was a mental adjustment for them to see the fairly radical change that we brought to, um, particularly Daphne and Fred. Shaggy was still more or less how Shaggy had always been. We tried to sharpen him a little bit. The fear was, if we make Fred, Velma, and Daphne all funny or equally funny, then the funniness of Shaggy and Scooby would be decreased, and we didn't want them to fall below the rest of the gang. We wanted everyone to sort of be equal, and Shaggy and Scooby still to hold their sort of unique place in the gang and in the audience's mind. So we sort of gave them more of the surreal breaking of physics rules. They could do a little bit more slapsticky, broader stuff than the rest of the gang, which sort of gave them their own little unique area they could play in. But Matthew Lillard in particular was really very proud and respectful of taking on the stewardship of Shaggy from Casey Kasem, and was very collaborative with Shaggy in terms of finding this version of Shaggy. I think he did a really great job. And Frank is a legend. He's been doing Fred since the beginning, and he still sounds like an 18-year-old. It's amazing to work with him. And the hard thing was getting them to read much faster than they were used to. I tend to write stuff that needs to be really paced up and read at a really fast clip. But that just took a couple episodes for everyone to adjust to. Okay, wow, we're going to go that fast, huh? And once they did, they were off and running, and they had a lot of fun with the stuff. And I thought Frank did Fred brilliantly, just hilariously.
And one of the things that Be Cool did really well was kind of changing the way that the gang would split up in different instances. How much fun was it to kind of play with the dynamic of the gang?
That was something that we definitely were trying more in second season, was pairing up the characters in different ways than we had done before. Shaggy and Velma were hanging out, and Daphne and Scooby were hanging out in the Worston show at the dog show episode. We began exploring just pairings of the characters and how they would relate and interact, and find little stories just to strengthen the individual relationships. And it was really fun. It was really the point of the show was to have even the mysteries themselves be personal to the gang. In most of the episodes, whether or not they solved the mystery had personal stakes for at least one of the main gang. Again, in the first episode, it was Velma trying to get into this college. If they solved the mystery, she did. If they didn't, she would not get into this college. Um, and so tying the gang directly into the mysteries, into the stories, making the episodes very character driven about the gang, um, was also something fairly kind of new to Scooby Doo, and allowed us to keep the gang sort of front and center and emotionally very involved with and connected to what was happening, which is trying to solve a mystery.
Definitely. And I wanted to backtrack a bit here and just ask how you got into animation in the first place.
Through Dan Povenmire, who, along with a Swampy Marsh, created Phineas and Ferb. I had known Dan for years and years and years, and we were both in bands at the same time, and we had met through a friend of mine who went to USC with Dan, and we had always just liked each other and liked each other's work. We actually almost married sisters. So we were, however that would make you related as family. We were almost that. Um, he married his sister. I didn't actually end up marrying mine. But so Dan, I had been writing comedy for theater and for the stage for a few years, which I would recommend to any writer to do that. It's just such a great place to sort of develop your own voice and try stuff out, where you're not going to get notes and you're not going to get and you get immediate audience reactions. You can adjust stuff and just sort of see how it's all working. And as I said earlier, Dan saw something that I had written on the stage, and he had just sold Phineas and Ferb to Disney, and asked if I would write on the show, and I said, yeah, sure, if they let me, and they did, and it ended up being a really, really great fit, just for the odd skill set I had developed at that point, which was this sort of silly comedy, music, art. Animation was a fairly natural fit. It was never a goal. It was never something I really sought out. I sort of fell into it and have really enjoyed it. It's been really, really fun and rewarding.
With you and Zach both coming from Phineas and Ferb, and you had mentioned earlier that trying to make Be Cool the Scooby-Doo version of Phineas and Ferb, were you actively trying to make the humor kind of similar, or is that just more your style?
Well, Warner Brothers, I believe, had said, in an abstract way, that they wanted the Phineas and Ferb version of Scooby Doo. Phineas and Ferb was um, it was very much, at least the stuff I was writing on Phineas and Ferb was a tone and a style of comedy that I had been working on and playing with for forever, for a very, very long time, and um, and it sort of got absorbed into Phineas and Ferb, and just my voice with everyone else's voice became sort of the meta voice of the show. And uh, when they had mentioned a Phineas and Ferb version of Scooby Doo, Zach basically just wanted me to come in and do me, or sort of my sort of comedy tone that I tend to it is just sort of normal and what I do, and that's pretty much what Dan Povenmire had asked me to do when I was brought on to Phineas and Ferb. He had seen a stage show that I had written that was very silly, and he said, "I want you to write on the show and do that. I just don't water it down, don't change it, just write like you." And so I've been very, very lucky, just enormously lucky that the shows I've worked on, the people have been pretty much asking me to come on and just write like me. So they're sort of a specific sort of tone and comedy, but hopefully, not out of reach for anyone else in terms of relatability or whatever.
Definitely. And do you have a specific writing process at all, or do you just work from the top down?
I pretty much work from the top down. It is it's usually very slow at the beginning, getting the first couple pages, getting the characters up and running, talking to each other. That was the main goal and trick with Be Cool Scooby Doo. More than anything was just starting the gang talking to each other and reacting literally to the previous line. Someone says something and then sort of switching into the brain of the other character and making them react organically to it. And once I got them up on the page talking, then usually everything just sort of flowed from there organically, and sort of the domino effect would plow me through the rest of the scripts. Um, it was, and I guess that's pretty much how I write most things: is slow at the beginning, and then speed up as it goes. But Be Cool Scooby Doo was definitely like that. Um, Other than that, yeah, not much in terms of specific process.
And did you have any specific inspirations for any Be Cool episodes at all?
Um, yeah, you mean like, for instance, there were a couple episodes. The first one, Elias Kingston. We were very much trying to do, go back to the original Scooby Doo. Where are you? And how would we make that show now? So we went back to that original paradigm. That was the main inspiration, was the original show. Those five characters driving around in the mystery machine, solving a mystery in a different place every day. We went back to that, which was which is sort of the classic idea of what Scooby Doo is, but I think it actually was that in very few of the series. Am I correct? You probably know more about this than I do. But there weren't that many versions of the show where it was the gang driving around in a van from town to town solving mysteries all together. Was there?
Yeah, there's a couple, but mostly the goal is to kind of get away from that, I think.
Yeah, that's what it seemed to be. Is but we felt like we wanted to, because we were doing so many radical different things with the characters in the show, that giving it some grounding and some sort of very familiar foundation would be helpful, and also allow us to try to come up with an original monster or original location in Scooby Doo. It's virtually impossible after 50 years. I mean, they've done everything. We pretty much gave up even researching if, have they done a part alien, part squid monster? We gave up trying to figure out if it had been done before, because virtually everything had been done. But we found that we did, the Where There's a Will, There's a Wraith episode was sort of a reimagining of one of the Scooby Doo Where Are You episodes, with Scooby being named in a will, and everyone having to stay at the house, and the those phantom ghosts. We did a couple of episodes like that were, bringing back monsters or bad guys from the original series, and sort of doing them our way. What would be our take on that? So yeah, a lot of the inspiration was insular. It was coming from Scooby Doo itself.
And did you have a favorite episode to write?
I really, really enjoyed the Party Like It's 1889 episode. That was the the first one was really finding the show. That was the second one I wrote, but I think it aired eighth or something like that. But it was the one where I really found the gang to me. Like I writing them became, they suddenly clicked in, and I could navigate them and understand what they would do sort of innately. So that one was very fun and holds a special place in my heart. How about you? Do you have a favorite?
Ooh. Um, I have quite a few actually. I really like All Paws on Deck,
Yeah.
and I just watched the oh, what's it called? The Upsetting Shorts one yesterday again,
Yes, Night of the Upsetting Shorts.
which was also fantastic.
Oh, thanks. That was Kyle Stafford, who was an editor on the show. He's also a really, really great writer, really funny guy, and yeah, I worked with him a lot in the editing room, and he asked me, he's like, he told me, I'm interested in writing. I would love to write one of these, and I said, yeah. So he wrote that one with me, and also the Magic Castle one, um, the the what's the name of that one with Freddie or not, the
Oh, I
magician.
don't remember what it's called.
Um, yeah, I don't either. But those are actually two of my favorite episodes. Kyle just got the silliness. Some of them like Madcap or In Space were slightly, or the Do Not Disturb were slightly more, a little heavier, a little scarier, a little more serious. And I love that the show could do that, but it also could go the other way and just be just completely silly and lighthearted, like Upsetting Shorts, and Kyle did those silly ones just really, really well. So yeah, that one was a lot of fun.
And did you have a favorite episode of the show in general?
Um, I have a few different favorites for very different reasons. Um, as I mentioned earlier, Party Like It's 1889 was a personal favorite simply because I really felt like I sort of found the gang and found the tone and found it, from a writing point of view. I still like that episode as an episode. Besides the sort of the personal, satisfaction of feeling like, oh, I found it, yay. I still think it was a kind of a cool idea to have them go to a mystery murder party and you know to solve a fake mystery, and a real one happens to be going on as well. Um, you had mentioned El Bandito. That was another favorite. Again, for the episode itself, which I wrote with Tom Pugsley, who I'm also currently working with on the Lego show that I'm doing. But it was the first season was a difficult, sort of tricky season, trying to find the show and get everyone on the same page, and just sort of figure out what we're doing. And Zach and I were feeling like we were flailing a little bit, but El Bandito sort of brought us back, and I thought was like, oh, we're back on track. This is what the show is. And I always just really, really liked that episode, and I thought we sort of hit our stride up, from that through the rest of the season one up into about three quarters into season two. I thought we did some really, really fun, great work. Um, I loved People versus Fred Jones. That was another one I'd wanted to do since the beginning, a courtroom thing, where we tell the mystery sort of in flashback. That was super fun. The ones where we went to ancient Greece, or we did, the Scrooge episode, just plopping our version of the gang into
different time periods, or destroying famous beloved horror literature or stories like Christmas Carol. I wanted to do that a lot more. If we had a season 3, I probably would have with Bram Stoker and Dracula and Frankenstein and like all these honored horror books. Putting our Scooby-Doo gang into them, and it turns out that it wasn't really a monster; it was a guy in a mask. So basically, ruining great literature was a goal of mine that we were able to do at least once. So that was super fun. There's a lot of them that I love for different reasons.
Moving back to characters, did you have a favorite character to write for?
At first, it was Daphne, and then it slowly became Fred over time. And probably part of that is due to enjoying writing Daphne so much, because Fred was the one who was mostly having the strong reactions to what Daphne was doing, and eventually I began realizing I was having so much fun with Fred's reactions, that I was almost aiming Daphne like a weapon at Fred just to be able to write Fred's reactions. And so I think you sort of see the shift as the series progresses through 2 seasons, where Fred becomes slightly more the focus of episodes, and until really the finale is sort of about Fred and his father, and sort of what we start exploring, what drives him to solve mysteries. It shifted more to Fred.
And I can't find a good credit list for this, but you also wrote at least a handful of songs for the show as well, right?
Yes, yeah, I wrote a handful. It was a very hectic schedule. It was a difficult show to write. I mean, there's a lot to do in every episode, a lot to service. So it became difficult for me to write more songs and do that stuff. But yeah, I wrote a few.
And what was it like to kind of juggle like writing an episode and writing a song and doing all of the roles that you needed to do?
It was great. It's fun. We did that on Phineas and Ferb. I wrote songs. I have an art background, so I did some storyboarding, and as well as writing. So I was very used to sort of juggling all that stuff. So and songwriting is really, really great and fun. So I certainly would have done it much more had I had the time. Jake Monaco, the composer for the series, was just so good. I loved the score of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, and how on the end credits he did a version of the title sequence music, sort of in a style that complements the location or the theme of that particular episode. He just did all the smart, great stuff, and a lot of the songs and music stuff for the chase scenes fell to Jake eventually, and he did a brilliant job with all of that stuff. So it was never a matter of, oh, I have to do this, or we had such a great crew, such a talented group of people working on that show that it was a bummer I couldn't write more songs because I enjoy it, but I don't think it hurt the show.
Had the show been able to continue, how many seasons do you think it could have gone on for?
I think that we probably could have gone on and actually done really interesting stuff for a few seasons. I mean, certainly the third season would have been a very strong, experimental, fun season, as we began expanding in second season, seeing what we could do and how we could push on things. Things began broadening and opening up. So it felt like we were just sort of getting going when everything got shut down. But I'd like to think that we had a really strong, fun gang that were sort of good characters to drive stories. So if everyone was willing to be go along with pushing the boundaries and keep sort of widening the scope of what we were capable of doing, we could have gone on forever. It's if we were sort of stuck doing the same sort of more traditional, solve a mystery. Early on, Warner Brothers wanted, Zach and I wanted to do some funnier monsters and ghosts. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was sort of our example of a monster that was both frightening and silly and funny at the same time. And we wanted to play around with that a little bit, but they wanted us to try to keep as traditional and classic with the monsters as possible, which also meant no talking, just sort of monsters, which was fine and also did help sort of ground the show. And they loosened up. We did, in the very first episode of Last Kingston Talks, but we eventually got to the court jester, ghost that sort of spoke in medieval rhyming, and so we were broadening that, and I think we even did some funny stuff with the monster. Certainly, what we would call the Shaggy and Scooby haircut scenes, where they would sort of dress up and trick the monster into believing the reality that they were trying to create for him, and he would sort of buy into it and go along with it for whatever reason. Monsters do that on Scooby-Doo. The the monsters are always sort of silly and funny in those moments. So, but exploring that stuff more, there's endless possibilities of what we could have done. I think, because I think that again, the essence of the show was the characters, and we could, almost even not have a mystery in a show and just still do interesting, compelling stuff with those characters.
And I think with Scooby properties in general, Warner Brothers and the various networks that it airs on has been either not doing a good job promoting or like having trouble getting it on a good like airing schedule. Did you notice that with Be Cool?
It's yeah, I don't understand that side of how things work in the entertainment industry. It seems, a lot of stuff seems counterintuitive. You would imagine that, putting a show on the same time at a time that's watchable for your target audience in particular. So it's on at a regular schedule and people know where to find it, and then promoting it, letting people know it's there would be sort of a no-brainer in terms of trying to make the show succeed. So putting it on erratically at different times and then stopping for a few months, then suddenly put on three, on a Wednesday at 2 a.m. and then suddenly on a Sunday at 2 p.m. It seems not the way to make a show succeed. But it happens all the time, and I'm not sure why or how or where those decisions are made. But you just sort of shrug and keep trying to do the best work you can.
Definitely. And what would you say to the people that, refuse to try it just because of how it looks?
I would say I'm sympathetic. I understand. I get it. Change is scary. But, to know that it seems that those who actually did give it a chance all seem to like it. And even if they still aren't I don't even think that the design of the characters where we finally landed is perfect or the most aesthetic thing it could have been, but it really works with the writing. It really makes the writing work. That they are more pushed and cartoony and stylized like that, and I think eventually you would just not notice it anymore. It would just be what the show is, and you would see you know a very sort of different, unique, funny Scooby Doo show, and it's probably worth giving it a chance.
And just generally, why do you think that Scooby-Doo has had such a lasting impact to go on for over 50 years now?
I don't know. Perhaps because it has constantly evolved and changed, and because, like we were saying earlier, um, they never really make the same show again over and over again. They changed up, the very nature of what the show is about from iteration to iteration, sometimes dramatically, and and because of its flexibility, and at the core, it's you know lovable. Scooby Doo is just such a great character, and a lovable character, relatable character. So is Shaggy. I mean, I don't think, is there a Scooby Doo without Shaggy in it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I would doubt it. Yeah, Matthew Lillard had talked to me once about Shaggy, and um, I was bemoaning a joke that I had written for Shaggy that uh, was Warner Brothers decided, no, we don't want Shaggy to say that. It was very, very early on in the process before everything was established. It was probably a joke I could have used later in the series, but at first they were like, no, that seems too smart for Shaggy. And I was bemoaning that to Matthew Lillard, who said, yeah, but at the same time, Shaggy and Scooby are really the entry point for little kids, for the younger audience into this world, because they're so relatable. I mean, little kids are afraid of monsters under their bed. They're hungry all the time. I mean, they're these sort of id characters like Shaggy and Scooby are so relatable to who Scooby Doo is aimed at. They just hit sort of a universal zeitgeist, and I think that and apparently it always works. It always is appealing to people and to kids. And then you've got the older generations who grew up with whatever version was on TV when they were growing up is sort of their version, and that they love, and they end up wanting their kids to see Scooby Doo. So I think it's a variety of things, but they've kept it mixed up. They've kept it interesting. They've kept the conversation going, and at its heart, it is something that is just very, very likable and entertaining.
And what was it like for you to step onto the show where, the characters are so well known and it's such a beloved property?
Um, it was at first a challenge because that there's a quote about knowing how too far you can go, and that was sort of the question for us. Was we knew we were going to be actually changing these beloved characters. We were going to be doing some fairly drastic things that haven't been done before with them, which was both exciting and also we wanted to be you know we were always very respectful about Scooby Doo, and we were hoping what we were doing was sort of enhancing and bringing out aspects of particularly the original series, but the characters and the idea of what Scooby-Doo is in general, and putting it on display in this sort of new way, putting the diamond in a different setting, that would be entertaining and illuminating. So there was a reverence there as well for the history of it and the weight of it. But we didn't let that really kind of get in the way of also changing whatever we felt needed to be changed in order to make the show what it needed to be. Hopefully we struck that balance.
I think that covers all of the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add at all?
No, I think I've rambled quite enough. Yeah, no, there's nothing specific.
Perfect. And just before we end, do you have any recent projects that you'd like to promote at all?
Well, I'm currently working on a show called Lego City Adventures for Nickelodeon, which is the second season has just started airing. And if you enjoyed Phineas and Ferb and Be Cool Scooby-Doo, then I think you would certainly enjoy this show. It's a very, very original and different show that's trying something new that I've never seen before, and it's a lot of fun. So I would say check it out.
Awesome. And lastly, what are your social media channels if people would like to get in touch with you?
I am Jon Colton Barry pretty much everywhere, on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook. I'm fairly easily found, and do interact a lot with people who are interested in the various things. So yeah, people tend to find me pretty easily.
Perfect. Yeah, well, I think that covers everything. Thanks so much for chatting with me today, Jon.
Oh, thank you so much, Alex. It was really, really fun.
Before we end this episode, here are a handful of side conversations that didn't end up fitting into the main interview, but I still thought were worth tacking on at the end.
Yeah, it is a style of comedy that is, I was sort of raised in a household with a lot of creative people and a lot of very funny people, and along with cartoons in the morning, I would watch Monty Python and Marx Brothers movies, and early Woody Allen films. A lot of that stuff is almost like living cartoons. There's a lot of absurdity and surreal humor and silliness, but it's all smart. These are all very educated, people being really, really silly. And that was the humor that I grew up on, and it's sort of in my blood. And it felt like, so as we moved into the 80s, humor sort of shifted a little bit to more sort of dumb guy humor. And it's just sort of just totally different. And there was a lot of, and there has been, and there still is, a lot of amazing, brilliant comedy. But I always was attracted to sort of pre-1980s, a certain kind of pre-1980s comedy that you don't see a lot of now. And it's interesting bringing it into animation shows for families, specifically aimed at younger audiences, because it is just not a style or a tone that they're really going to see a lot in other places.
Like, see? You can't beat inflation. Sorry, you're right. Politics have no place in balloon animalry. Voila! A meerkat! an orangutan, a space shuttle, a manatee, a fruit bat with stomach flu, a twisted balloon, an evil clown, the signing of the Magna Carta.
And it was just, I think, across the whole show, it was just really nice to see a lot more dimensions to all 5 of the characters.
Yeah, I think so. It was certainly interesting to give them dimensions finally and find them. I was hoping and slightly surprised that I know the show took a lot of hits and was would not be considered a great a big hit show with wonderful ratings, but I think some of the things that we did were good ideas that I would hope people would pick up on and explore in future iterations of Scooby-Doo, and one of them being um, you know they don't have to be those personalities, but really look at Fred, Velma, and Daphne and give them strong character points of views. You know give them personalities, um, which it felt. I worked on. I consulted on the Scoob movie um, for just a short while, and they were interested in bringing in all the Hanna-Barbera characters and making sort of a shared universe sort of movie. But one question that came up at one point was, how do we get rid of Fred, Velma, and Daphne, because I don't think people are that interested in them, and that question always just sort of blows my mind, and you can hear that question echoing through the history of Scooby Doo, where they are bringing in other characters to make the show interesting, or they're getting rid of one of those three characters because they don't know what to do with them, and the solution rarely ever seems to be, well, why aren't we looking at why aren't people interested in those characters and then solving that problem? Let's make them interesting. It's just it's the big question about Scooby Doo for me. And I know there are people who absolutely love Daphne going back to 1969, just how she is or was, and love Fred, for who he is and was. And I'm not, certainly not trying to take away the people who love them how they traditionally have been. And they sort of more of a blank canvas allows you to sort of project your own feelings onto them and pull out from them whatever you want to take from them, which I certainly see the value of, but it's still would love to see other people try to solve that problem in their own interesting way of really giving the main gang very distinct sort of points of views and personalities.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Jon Colton Barry for chatting with me. For more groovy content, be sure to check at Unmasked SD on Twitter, at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram, or at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook under the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo podcast. If you liked this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. And if you want to follow Jon, you can find him on social media at Jon Colton Barry. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode in this month's Be Cool Scooby-Doo theme, which features producer Zach Moncrief. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!